Hello, everyone. So welcome. This is our special event that's done through the Office of Institutional Research and Assessment, as well as, which is part of or within that is the Center for Teaching and Learning. So for this big event, we're going to be having a special discussion dealing with AI, artificial intelligence, and higher education. My name is Brent Anders, and I'm the director of the Office of Institutional Research and Assessment here at AUA, American University of Armenia. And I am very honored and happy to introduce to you our special guest, our subject matter expert. So I want to make sure that I read this right. This is Dr. Kherlopian, who's a professor and researcher in artificial intelligence here at AUA. Dr. Kherlopian holds a PhD in biophysics with a focus on machine learning from Cornell University and completed a fellowship in high-performance computing and artificial intelligence at Princeton University. Additionally, Dr. Kherlopian is an entrepreneur and businessman with cross-sector industry experience, including global Fortune 100 companies, as well as government organizations such as the FDA and NASA. Very impressive. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Brent. Absolute pleasure to be here today.
Great. Okay, so this is the way it's going to work. I have a series of questions here that deal specifically with artificial intelligence and higher education. And then after these specific questions, then I'm going to open it up to questions that we've already received from students as well as instructors here at AUA. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. This is question 1. Please briefly describe or explain what artificial intelligence, AI, is, and please use layman terms because many are still just learning about what all of this is.
Sure thing, Brent. And there's this saying that if you ask 10 artificial intelligence experts the definition, you'll get 20 answers. I'll provide some framework for our discussion here today. So if we think about artificial intelligence as technology that can help us make decisions. So think about driverless cars. The vehicle is making decisions in terms of turning, stopping, braking. One aspect of making decisions is, navigation. And then another aspect of making decisions is in generation of content. So generating that route and executing it is having some fascinating analogs and even in terms of generating content. Text, for example, images is another example. Below that, enabling these fantastic capabilities is machine learning, which is really about finding patterns in data. You can imagine to be able to drive a car to drive itself. Before that, there's massive exercise in terms of understanding road conditions, understanding risk factors, in terms of being able to generate text, massive machine learning associated activity in terms of reading past corpuses of data, so past publications, great data sets from the UN in multiple languages. And then below this, you have supporting disciplines such as computer vision, which is teaching computers to see, computer audition and natural language processing, teaching computers to hear and read respectively. There's even areas such as computer olfaction, the sense of smell, graph analysis. So what this means in aggregate is there's artificial intelligence that's built on these supporting capabilities of finding patterns in data to specific types of data, computer vision being video and text, for example, that allows us to make decisions and to generate content. And both of those points have massive implications in education.
Okay. Yeah, so it's complicated. There's a lot to it for sure. And I think maybe we'll get more of an explanation of its uses and capabilities as we go through these other questions. So, okay, question 2. How exactly can AI be harnessed or used to help faculty or even students in higher education?
There's a few topic areas we're seeing in terms of innovation at university in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. So, for example, this idea that's classically held in a classroom is that there's the average cadence. The instructor needs to there's certain topics for certain students, they're able to track along. And then the strongest students are sometimes pulled down to the average. We can, with AI, theoretically have private tutors assisting the instructor. So it's almost like an analogy of a personal trainer. Each student has an AI tutor as part of the educational experience. And what that looks like, an actual robot, a software system that provides recommendations. Well, that's one shift that is possible with AI, where the instructor focuses more on motivation, guidance, team building style attributes, as opposed to the pacing of the delivery of content, which can be more personalized to a student. One area, sort of AI for personalization for the student learning journey. Another area is, and we touched on it in the previous question briefly, is in the generation of content. So there is a shift in writing. And if we take, for example, translation, it used to be that translators would start de novo. They would take one document and manually translate everything. Now we know things like Google Translate are not perfect, but a translator even actually starts with that, does a rough pass, and then edits that. So in terms of the educational experience, in theory, a strong writer, thinking through a student writer, doing an exercise or an assignment in an essay, could write their best essay if they were working with the machine in tandem, again, as analogous to the translator. So personalized AI tutor, AI assisted content generation are two, I'd go to say, seismic shifts and things we need to grapple with as educators.
Okay, yeah, definitely some new possibilities there for sure. Question 3. Does this mean that AI is going to take over and become professors or lecturers all by themselves?
If we look at, disruptive technology in education, one area is if we consider MOOCs, massively online open courses. So Coursera is an example, and different universities have offerings. Now, some of the course stats are phenomenal. So like 100,000 students can attend a course for a semester. And indeed, the most popular courses are taken virtually and asynchronously over 1 million times. There's a bit of a push-pull here. On one hand, that's wild, 100,000 students in a classroom. A large auditorium is, 500 folks. Now, then if you look at the stats, well, it's like, okay, only a few percentage points are completing the course, learning the material. And you might say, well, 5%, knowledge acquisition in a course is not really that good. But if that means 5,000 people learn something, or if you scale it one order of magnitude higher, where it's 1 million and 5% is 50,000, a single professor cannot reach that many students. The reason I'm highlighting this is the technology alone is not enough in education. So MOOC as a disruptive technology in education is still missing the same thing that AI is missing, is that motivation. So this is like a personal trainer providing not only content and technique, but motivation. Right. So I would say, Brent, the instructor's role will increasingly shift to motivation and human-human interaction in terms of assignments, and the technology will help with the scaling and the personalization. So I wouldn't say we're going to have robot teachers anytime soon in an absolute sense, but there'll definitely be some shifts in terms of important aspects of an instructor's acumen and the amount of time that they spend on different types of activities.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as far as the instructor doing more, dealing with motivation as well as relevancy and helping the student understand, well, why is this important? Or giving additional examples, not just the data, but all the other aspects associated with trying to learn the information. Yeah, okay. Okay, question 4. What are some problems or negative aspects of AI in higher education?
I think, on one hand, there's technologies such as Grammarly. There's technologies such as Google Translate, and there's increasingly advanced neural network-based generative content. And this is an assertion I will make, is that whether it's mathematics or understanding different languages or grammar or writing, if a student or a professional is not able to do the example de novo, that presents a risk. For example, yes, it's great to accelerate the translation. Yes, it's great to extend content creation. Yes, it's great to double check or triple check the grammar. But if the technology is introduced too early and the instructors interacting with the student is never able to go from that base whiteboard or pen and paper, the argument I would make is the technology stunts foundational learning in the student. So the risk here is that if the technology is used immediately in the classroom on day one, particularly as something as important as writing, there is a risk.
Right. Okay. So I think maybe we're going to address some of the solutions to that here as we go on. So that's an important thing as far as understanding when to use the technology and how to best use the technology. Okay. Question 5. What about students using AI to cheat on assignments? Right. So I guess this kind of ties together, right?
Yeah, so this gets back to, and it's something, in terms of university coursework or even in, early days book reports, a child might start doing. If the goal is to have the student have the patience, the ability to write, to sit down, to research, there is an amount of hours expected for that assignment. Well, there's a debate. Well, if they just put in a prompt to a generative neural network, and a neural network is a algorithmic strategy inspired by the human brain. And for the purpose of this discussion, that technology can be used to generate an essay immediately. I would say that's akin to the AI as an entity or the purchase of an existing published essay. So if the expectation of the students and the professor is that the student writes it, then this ability to source something that's been written before or is written by another person, and this is person in quotes because an AI wrote it, that's a challenge and a problem. So as instructors or as educators, one way is to say a hard ban, or you deliberately introduce exercises later in the course that enable some of this technology to be used. So yeah, there's the whole counterfeit point. Increasingly advanced technology can be used for counterfeiting, which can be helped by increasingly advanced detection capability. But these are some of the risks and opportunities around these generative technologies.
Yeah, and I think it ties in with what you were saying before about us as instructors needing to change the whole evaluation process, right? So it's not just, oh, I want you to write an essay, so I just evaluate your essay, but I need to evaluate the process, whether that's working with AI or not. If it is working with AI, okay, first do a rough draft, now first do an outline, now do a rough draft. Let's see what your AI came up with. Let's see how we can modify what it generated, because that's just a starting point for you. And then again, so there's lots of different aspects for the process, evaluating the process, not just the end product.
Absolutely, Brent. Increasingly, the ability to assess knowledge acquisition by the final work product is being strained. So techniques, as exactly as you mentioned, in a course that the students are encouraged to show an outline. The outline could be graded, that an abstract or a summary be generated, as in the student writes it, that be graded. Then the full rough draft, and then the final. In some ways, this is more overhead. In other ways, it's actually the work that can be graded, because the assessing the process understanding will be increasingly valuable. Process knowledge and methodology in the workforce are more valuable now because of AI, in terms of finding of the information and generating of the information. So that's an important shift that has entire economy implications.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's becoming like a soft skill, an additional thing besides just content knowledge. So yeah, okay. So these are all been great questions and very great answers. Now I want to switch over to some of the questions that we received from actual instructors and students. So these are some additional questions. Question one here is, are we losing the ability to detect whether content is created by a computer or a real person? And if so, what should instructors do to help ensure a proper learning process? I think this question got addressed with what we just talked about, as far as that process becomes that much more important, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Brent. So the shift from grading a final essay to the process steps is one strategy. Another strategy is doing recorded. So for example, standardized tests now have setups where there's literally a recording done while the work is being done. They basically protect against this idea of a lookup happening or something being copied from somewhere else. Another approach is using anti-plagiarism software, which is getting increasingly advanced. But yeah, more time-boxed writing exercises, grading of the intermediary components, and then also the fundamental bond between instructor and student, that all of the students are expected to operate in a related style, because this actually ties to the personalized AI tutor. There should not be, the educational experience is about maximizing energy and effort for knowledge acquisition and increasing of capability. The goal of education is not just to complete tasks, it's to get stronger. And if a student can complete tasks earlier, they can be challenged more.
Yeah.
So yeah, some points here.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, there's so many, I guess it's important for us to understand that AI can be used in many different ways along that process, because it makes me think of, calculators. Like, of course we use calculators. No one says that, oh, we shouldn't use calculators because you won't know math. But at the same time, it's still vitally important that we teach students at the very early ages, hey, you have to know how to do this without a calculator. And then once you get to a certain point, then yeah, use your calculator so that you can then process and do even more advanced type of math. So yeah, that process and that specific points of when to use technology, that's extremely important. So that was a great point. Okay, next question. What will be the role of AI specifically in the classroom? And won't using AI in the classroom change the structure of student to instructor interaction? I think you were hinting at this before.
Yeah, we touched on this previously. And if we consider, education across different fields, computer literacy became mandatory. And you just mentioned a calculator. So one shift here is that, okay, if someone can do long division or maths at a requisite level to help them do, for example, certain architectural calculations, perhaps they should use a calculator, software equivalent. So there's this computer literacy related to computation. There's this usage of database systems as an example, we offload our need to memorize phone numbers by and large by our address books on our phone. So computer literacy in these various forms, comfort of interacting with software, with computers, became standard. I believe something similar will happen with AI literacy, where the conversation will shift from should you or should you not use generative software in your work at the highest level, or when you are graduating or in the workforce. It will be standard in the same way a translator takes a pass at a document with Google Translate first, because that has become the norm. So I believe these AI related technologies, whether it's a personalized tutor, whether it's AI and a person writing something together, the nature of writing will shift. And then in the same way, the nature of communication has shifted with the emergence of email and texting. And at one point, it'll be so ubiquitous, so common. Remembering how to do it the old way might not be possible.
Wow. Yeah, interesting future for sure. Okay, next question. Will AI help students be able to do more in a shortened amount of time? And does that mean that students will be in college for a shorter amount of time as well?
I believe if we consider the increase of knowledge, universities have been around for more than a millennia. And so how do we reconcile the increase with knowledge and then the idea that it takes several years for someone to have roughly a college experience? So I think there will be more knowledge acquisition in aggregate and more time saved in certain tasks. So let's take data entry, for example. How much of your day, my day, the listener's day, student's day, instructor's day is involved like typing something or copying something from one or retyping something. There's many jobs in the global economy that are basically, whether it's in finance or healthcare, it's that copying text from one place to another. Indeed, it could be nuanced, like healthcare information, extracting one bit of data to another, or finance, one bit of data to another report. But if we consider what AI is doing there, is AI can automate data extraction and entry. So that means both in education and in work, the type of activity we are doing is less about movement of data or processing of information. It's about asking questions. It's about iteration toward discovery. And you can imagine where, in the future, you could have something like, instead of going through your emails every day and analogously going through all your course assignments, you might have a conversation with an AI. This week, please follow up with my contacts in these countries related to these points. These are the messages I want to send across. And then that information is conveyed. Similarly, for a course, there's an interaction with an AI, could be a spoken word, could be a chat interface, could be even a neural interface, where the student is engaging in getting stronger by having some AI interaction. So again, this could be something as fantastic as Star Trek, where they're interacting with the computer requests for help. The human needs to be quite creative to advance what they're doing. But the nature of education can mean we're solving increasingly large problems. Students are acquiring more knowledge. So I don't see a drastic reduction because exposure is needed, but the workforce will need stronger graduates. So I see that type of equilibrium as opposed to the college experience, collapsing to 3 months.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because although students will be able to do more, there's always more to learn, right? There's always new skills, new things The environment, the industry is changing and evolving, so we want to give them those opportunities. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting and different, but I'm not sure it'll necessarily be shorter, but it could be. It just is a matter of how we manipulate, how we present things. So yeah, lots of possibilities there. Okay, here's an interesting question. This deals with sort of some of the ethics, the aspects of this. Who is making these decisions regarding AI? Who gets to choose as to the ethics dealing with AI and how it can be used?
Yeah, the ethic question, relates to society, government, and even the contract between an instructor and the students. So let's take an area such as social media. So there's the core creators, and then there's major companies around this technology. And so one formulation was, hey, the technology companies don't own the content. It's a user-generated content. Therefore, it can be self-policed. People can report things. It'll be fine. However, as per government hearings, society has said no. Social media is the equivalent of the digital streets. It requires policing, content moderation. This is a situation where a powerful technology emerged. Societies via governments responded in a way. If I were to make another observation, there is mass addiction to social media. The chimes, even things like you get an email alert that a post happened. It's like to pull you back into the network. It's like, why not just give the message in the alert? So if I were to make an analogy here with perhaps the most challenging part of the pharmaceutical industry, that might be a technological reckoning, if you will. Perhaps, we'll see. So to this question, who decides, when powerful technology emerges, whether it's nuclear weapons, it's a debate. The technology in the end gets developed. It can be used for good and bad. And it's no different with AI.
Yeah, great point. And I think it's important for us to learn about these technologies and then to have these debates and to have these discussions and to look and think about the ethics associated with it and bring that up, because in the end, it's society that demands certain things that will create these organizations or these laws and policies. So it's all of us that helps to decide all of that. So yeah, okay. All right, last question here. What can we do to help other instructors know about these important new developments dealing with AI?
Well, one is this great forum you've provided here, Brent. So thank you for the invitation. University environments is fantastic. Students will often, this is sometimes generational, spot emerging technology trends. So that engagement between the instructor and what the students are seeing is a very powerful conduit. And then lastly is to actively research, engage with these tools.
Right.
If you are an instructor and you have essays as part of your assignments, actually go interact with these generative neural networks and see what that experience is like. Can you, as an innovative instructor, design an assignment that includes that new technology? Can you consider things like Grammarly? Is a score as related to the grade really a question of access to technology? And so this relates to style. Be prescriptive. Don't use the technology in these few assignments. Use it in these ones and beyond. And then the last one, everything that's possible. So I think this really gets back to instructor innovation and having a good dialogue with the students.
Yeah, great points. I totally agree. We learn a lot from our students as well. And just the engagement, being part of scholarly culture and attending these type of events, listening to these things, checking out other videos, books, articles. That's how we understand these things and again, share that with our peers as well. So yeah, great stuff, great stuff. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, Dr. Kherlopian. We appreciate it very much. And I also want to thank everyone that's viewing this event. And please stay tuned for other events that are coming up from the Teaching and Learning, the Center for Teaching and Learning here at the American University of Armenia. So thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody.